Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Carl's Conversations. It has been a while. Carl had to take a break, but we're back again. And as always, we'll always try to bring you very interesting subject matter, very timely subject matter. And as always, we like to be truth tellers. Carl's Conversations is a safe place to have difficult conversations, and we very often deal with difficult conversations here, difficult topics. And today's topic is no less, as you can see from the title, and they're still killing us. You know, where do we go from here? And as you can imagine, thank God for my wife Tisha, who's always the number one fan, first to give us a comment. God bless you, dear. And the people are starting to come on. And just for you guys to know, this is also available on YouTube. Carl's Conversations on YouTube. We're going to deal with a very difficult conversation here tonight. We're talking about the police shootings that continue in our nation. We're going to talk about race relationships. We're going to talk about the mass shootings that continue to happen. And I'm sure that we'll jump on several other topics that are related. And the question is, where do we go from here? Have we made any progress? Or does 2021 resemble 2020 so much that it's hard to tell the difference? We don't know, but we're hoping to get a little closer to resolution before the night is over. Some people say, why do you guys keep talking about this? All this talk. I don't know about y'all, but for me, talking certain things out has helped me to process. Also probably has kept me from doing very stupid things. And these are three very strong personalities that I have here with me tonight. Each of them have been on with me before. My first cousin, Mickey Leon, is here with us. Thank you, sir, for being with us.
Thank you
Of
for
course, she's just like family, Miss Elisa Middleton. I think that's the first time I said her name correctly on air. And she's been so patient with me. Thank you. And none other than the Heather Hutchinson. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Heather, she's a tremendous person and a warrior with us in this fight for equality and justice. And we appreciate all of our panelists today. And so I want to start with the shooting, the police shooting that happened in the little town, I think it was Brooklyn Center, right outside of Minneapolis. Man, there have been several things that have happened this year. Of course, the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. And, we've had a few mass shootings since then. And of course, gun control continues to come up. And man, I tell you, but when I heard about this thing and then saw that video, I'll be quite honest with you, it did take me back to what I was feeling last year when we saw what happened to Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis. And to think that it happened only 10 miles from where Mr. Floyd was killed. And I want to make myself very clear tonight before I start turning this over to the panelists. We're not here to necessarily bash police or non-blacks, non-people of color. I think that my panelists are as dismayed as I am. You almost throw your hands up and say, at this point, what do we do? When will this stop? To my surprise, I saw a clip of Pat Robertson. I can't remember whether he did. He made this comment this morning or yesterday. Even Pat Robertson, who is the right of the conservatives, who has been unabashed about backing police, even in unpopular situations. I'm not sure if y'all had a chance to see his comments, but in no uncertain terms, he said that this has to stop. The massacre has to stop. And so I'm wondering, with his positioning, with the circle of friends and circle of influence that he has, are there more people in April of 2021 who will come along with us that are saying this has to stop than it was last year, May in 2020, when this happened to Mr. Floyd? So I'm going to start with Mickey, then Elisa, then Heather. Just want to talk about first, of course, you're welcome to introduce yourself if you like. I want to talk about what are your thoughts about what we're seeing with this thing up in Minneapolis area.
Okay, first of all, hi everybody. I'm Mickey Leon. As Carl said, that's my first cousin. Um, I'll just jump right into it. So it's it's a bit crazy, up in Minneapolis. I mean, it really with the shooting of Dante Wright and the cop is Kim Potter. It seems like that whole city, that whole area specifically, they really have a problem. But I think bigger, what I think overall is like the mindset of the police department, not just that police department. We'll use that because it happened there, right? So the mindset of the police department and how they approach black and brown people. Like this woman was, she wants us to believe that after 26 years on the force, she made a mistake and pulled the wrong weapon, you know. But my thing of it is, your mind was already there. You saw this child because he was 20 years old. He's a child. You saw this child as a threat, like immediately. You know what I mean? And that is the mindset. That's what happens there. Philando Castile, George Floyd, now Dante Wright. You know what I mean? Like that is the mindset that they have in that area, and really in all police departments, in my opinion, when they see black or brown suspects or people that they want to label as suspects, you immediately are you afraid? It seems like they're that afraid. I mean, nobody wants to walk around and get shot, right? Nobody wants to get shot. But I feel like as a police officer, you kind of understand the risk associated with the job. So if you are truly that afraid, you are in the wrong line of work. If you shoot first and ask questions later. But normal, regular citizens with no training, we are supposed to be able to not shoot first. We're supposed to be able to do anything other than shoot and then ask questions later. You guys have training. She had 26 years worth, and you can make that kind of a mistake. It's something wrong there. That's my take on it.
I agree. Thank you for that. Elisa.
Yes, I agree with Mickey wholeheartedly when it comes to the mindset and the culture of the police department. It's a culture. So we know that with a 20-year-old who lives in the same proximity as George Floyd and saw what happened to George Floyd when he was handcuffed, we can expect to have a level of fear, right? At 20 years old. Now, my problem with this whole incident is it wasn't even her collar. The gentleman that was putting the other police officer that was arresting Dante, he had one handcuff on him and was getting ready to put the other handcuff on. So he jumps into the vehicle. The other officer was already bent over in the vehicle and going to put hands on him. And excuse my police terminology, but that's what it's called. Was going to put hands on him to drag him out the car. And now here she comes, Miss Kim Porter, because we want to make sure that we say her name. Potter comes, and now she's like training someone. So now here we go back to the mindset. So a rookie officer who is being trained the wrong way and being taught and indoctrinated with a perpetual mindset. Here she comes in the car, had to move the other officer who was already in the car. I watched this video in slow motion. That's how upset I was because this man did not have to die. And you yelling, taser, taser, taser. Your taser yellow. And I am not a gun expert by any means at all. But I have firearms and I have handled firearms and I have been through firearm training. Although her firearm did not have a safety on it, there's a significant difference between a firearm and a taser. The taser is yellow, number one. The firearm is black, maybe 2.5 pounds to 3 pounds different, a bigger grip. This is a grip. This is a firearm. And with the taser, you have to unlock it. And then when you point the taser, it has two lights, one red and one green. So the mistake, even if people want to say it was a mistake, you have consequences for your mistake. You have consequences for your implicit bias, and you have consequences for trying to indoctrinate something that you've been using for 26 years because you came in full force, locked and loaded, yelling taser, 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 but you have a 3-pound firearm, steel, not plastic, steel, in your hand. So you must face the consequences because if I make a mistake with my firearm and I kill anyone, my neighbor, my house guest, even someone who broke into my house, I cannot shoot that person unless they coming at me with the same amount of force. That's just the law. So I'm over that situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Elisa. Heather.
So, hi, Heather Hutchison. Obviously, I'm a white person on this panel, and I might be in the minority here, but I haven't watched the video. I didn't watch the video when George Floyd was killed either. I already know, and I can't. And even though my life isn't at risk, the same way that Black people are in our communities, the level of anger that I feel just is unhealthy. So I've recognized that I can't watch it. I do know enough about it to know some of the details, and none of them are comforting at all, obviously, like all of you have just shared. And it's not funny. It's almost laughable, though, at such a high cost. I mean, when I heard that was the excuse given by this officer, this veteran officer, I mean, I just shook my head. Like, who allowed that to be the excuse given? I feel like we keep looking for the police departments to be the ones who are going to bring change. You know, I want to see some of the higher ups come out in a press conference and just loudly denounce it and come right out the gate and say, you know what, she's gone. These are the things that we've put into place to make sure this never happens again. And it never happens. We're in this like insane loop of the same storyline over and over and over again. And not much changes, except for the names in the chorus. So I think, I don't know what the answer is, but I think we're getting to the place where there's going to have to be something outside of the law enforcement, entity that's going to have to change this, because they have proven over and over and over and over again that they are incapable of improving it themselves. And I've been very much someone who has guarded myself from speaking out just, with a brush across the whatever, everybody with a wide brush in the police department. Because I do know that there are good men and women who want to make a change. But where are you? Like, when is it going to get to the place? You would think when someone gets killed 10 miles from the same place that, the huge, like the murder by police that was like heard around the world, and less than a year later or a year later, when we're in the middle of that trial and you kill another young Black man 10 miles away, you would think in this past year, there would have been some of the good guys who would have shown up loudly to say there needs to be change. And I feel like it's this, this knee-jerk reaction that we have, especially for white people, that's, oh, this is really bad. We should do something to change it. It gets quiet for a little while, and then someone else dies. And there's nothing that's going to change this unless it happens outside of the police department. I just don't believe that there is. I don't. And I think that white people, and I won't get into this because this isn't my show, but in particular, I think white churches in a lot of ways have a lot of responsibility on this, because there's a lot of influence in those congregations. And I feel like if there were some people willing to stand up and say some hard truth, who are living inside of white skin, we might see some change. But unfortunately, a lot of us who are speaking out are people who, like myself, who feel like we don't have a lot of power to change the system. So not sure if anything I said made sense. I feel pretty emotional, but it's my initial thought.
Well, I tell you, you're not the only one that's emotional. There were a couple times today where I was very near tears, and I purposely, and believe me, I'm a crybaby, so the tears are not strange to me. But I was trying to keep myself away from it. I didn't want to become too emotional before the show, and I'm just playing back in my mind, this thing that happened in Virginia off of Route 460, Windsor, Virginia. The active duty Army lieutenant, young man, probably in his early 20s, the way that cop treated him, and that cop was Latino himself. He stopped the man that was Afro-Latino. You look at the young 13-year-old boy that's been shot in Chicago. I mean, and I'm wondering, and not just this, because this is this batch, right? But we've had batches over the decades. And what got me all emotional, I was looking at this video on YouTube. Is this man down in Raleigh, North Carolina. Man been locked up for 44 years, false charges. Come to find out, the prosecutors had all kind of evidence that was saying that he was free, but never turned it over. And after all these years of fighting, he finally got free. But then he had to fight the North Carolina governor to give him clemency so he could apply to get the $50,000 a year. And that man began to weep because he was saying, okay, you got me for 44 years. You gave me $750,000. You owe me some more money. You robbed me of my dreams. You robbed me of my life. You robbed me of everything that I could have become. Now I'm 64, about to turn 65, and you put a cap on it. How can you put a cap on the value of life? So the thing that was bothering me today is, what is the value of a human life? What goes through a law enforcement officer's mind when you see somebody that look like us? And let me tell you, a butthole cop is a butthole cop. They're butthole to everybody. But it seems to have an extra spice on it when it comes to us. And I'm saying, man, come on. That's an open question. Who would want to jump on it first? Is there any value?
So I'm going to say this. And I'm not, I have family members who are police officers. My uncle's a cop. My dean that brought me into my fraternity, he's a cop. So I know that there are good police officers out there. So, I'm not like bashing cops like that, but it's a culture, man. Like, the police have never been the friend of Black people. Never. Like, that has always been a institution that's used to control Black folks. I mean, all the way back to slave days. You know what I mean? So it's a whole culture, and the culture of it has to change. And the only way that changes is people have to get out of there. You have to put the people in power to get those folks out, to change the way that folks are trained and the way that they see us, the way that they see us. And also screening the cops that come in, because a lot of these dudes that come in to the police force, just like the military, some of these dudes that come into the military are people who they didn't have any, they were, for the lack of a better term, they were weak as hell when they were in school growing up. They didn't have any power. Maybe they were bullied or whatever, and they want a power grab. Like, you can take it back to the video that we saw earlier this week of I think it was another Army guy who was trying to beat up on the Black kid in the neighborhood because he wanted to know why he was in the neighborhood, and they're charging him now. But it's that same type of thing. They're letting these people into these positions of power, and these people did not have power when they were growing up or wherever they were. So now they want to flex. Now you're a cop and you think you're above the law. You have an institution that has created laws to protect them from being prosecuted. from being held accountable. It's like doctors too. You know what I mean? It's that same type of institution where like you can't sue a doctor. Anybody ever had a loved one killed by malpractice? You ever tried to sue them? I've had two. You cannot sue them. It's the same way with police officers. You can't hold them accountable because they have things that protect them. Then they got a whole legal system that protects them. You know, you have to find a prosecutor that is going to bring charges. You got to find a grand jury, you know, that's going to even allow it to happen, you know, and then you have to find a jury that's going to convict them. Even with George Floyd, there's 9 white people on that jury. There's 9 white people on that jury. Like, the prosecution did their job. I watched this whole trial like every day. The prosecution did their job. But at the end of the day, you have 9 white people. All it takes is one of them that wants to believe the police officers are good. Believing that police officers have an implicit bias shakes the core of a lot of white people, because a lot of them go about life thinking that if you just do what you're supposed to do, life is fair. So the thought of life not being fair for everybody, they don't know how to handle that. And that's not always their fault. We know life ain't fair. We know that. We can't take this off when we get up. We can't take it off. You know, we don't get to hide it. We don't get the benefit of the doubt. When we walk into the store, when we walk down the street, they look at us like they're crazy. Like, I got 2 degrees. I'm a cybersecurity major. Like, you know, I'm a professional. But you see, I got on this hoodie. So I wear my hoodie, which I wear hoodies all the time. And I'm walking down the street or I go into the store and people looking at me like I'm finna steal something. When in reality, I got more money than y'all behind the counter. But you don't know that, and you don't assume that because of the way that I look. But, you know, like if Heather were to walk in the same thing, they're not going to look at her like that. You know, they're not going to look at her like that. I mean, that's not her fault, but that's the culture. And it's the same way in the police force. So you got these people that have these thoughts about Black folks, period. Maybe they never had any interaction with Black people. And now you take their insecurities that they have with them, and then you put them on the police force, which gives them some power. They're trained by people like Kim Potter, who is already finna show you the wrong way to do something. All of that gets put together, and then you have a situation where you're running down an alley because you heard shots fired, and now you got a little brown boy that turns around. He threw the gun behind the thing. I watched a video, a clear video last night, you know, and saw different angles. He threw the gun behind the fence, but he turned around, he had his hands up. It was a split second, but your split second decision as a trained police officer is just to shoot this boy, just to shoot us. The Army lieutenant, he had his hands out the window. Everybody talking about just comply. What happened to respecting the uniform? When Colin Kaepernick was protesting, oh, we disrespecting the flag, we disrespecting the military. Now this man is an Army lieutenant in uniform. He's got his hands out the window. He drove to a well-lit area because you'd be an idiot in Virginia to be Black and get stopped by the police in Windsor, Virginia at night and not drive to a well-lit area. You a fool.
And let me say something, Mickey. For people who don't know that area, there's not a lot of shoulder space.
No.
You talk about in between those little towns, it's not a good idea to pull over in the dark like that. It's not safe. It is not safe. And so, matter of fact, that BP that he pulled into, myself and several of my family members are familiar with it because we gas up there, because we take that route.
Yeah.
Let me say something, and just to agree with some things that you said. Pat Robertson, and I don't quote him often, in that video, and Lucy said that she saw it, Lucy, one of our audience members, he said, we do not have the best and brightest in our police forces because the pay is so low. Matter of fact, he said, we got a bunch of clowns running around. If y'all don't believe it, go look at it for yourself. And I really thought about that. I said, you know what? He's right. We need to have the best and the brightest. And Pastor Daniel Bowman wrote, he said, we don't have bad apples. He said, the whole orchard is spoiled. We got a problem. And Lisa just said maybe it's going to take for civilians to get involved because we got to take it out of the hands of the police. Something has to change in this nation, and not just with the police, but the whole thing about how we deal with weapons. Heather, Elisa, y'all have any input on this?
Just listening, excuse me, I'm just a little choked up. I mean, it's overwhelming, and it is too much. And just to go back to your original question, no, they don't. Our human life as people of color, Black people in this country, it really never mattered. So we have to face really hard facts. That's heartbreaking. That brings tears to our eyes because nobody ever wants to be rejected or feel unwanted or unsafe in any relationship. So it doesn't matter. But the relationship with Black people in the United States, something has to give. There is not, we cannot, we can't reform this. We can't vote this. We cannot we can't keep doing the same thing that we have been doing and expecting anything different. The culture of the police department, like Daniel said, it's rotten. And it's rotten with racism. Okay, now remember, the police department got started out of slave trading. So we have a culture, an inherent bias that we deal with systemically from the police department to every facet of our being, just being Black. He's an educated man, a professional, wearing a hoodie, and he knows. Does it matter how much money you have? Because you can't throw money at racism. It does not matter how educated we are. I remember when we used to think, okay, well, if you just talk this way, or don't let them see you acting this way, if you get an education, if you do this, if you do that, and we have. Black women is the most educated demographic in this country. And yet, here we sit. Here we are. Yet again. Yet again. And to disrespect a United States soldier in the state of Virginia, where I pay taxes, I'm personally offended. Right? Because you say when Colin Kaepernick was kneeling peacefully, right? Respect the troops. We back our troops. We say Black Lives Matter. You say all lives matter. We say we want police reform. You back the blue. All of this Asian hate crime, I'm waiting for all lives matter. I haven't heard from all lives matter.
Nowhere to be seen.
When it came down to Lieutenant Karen Nazario, the lieutenant in Virginia, I didn't hear anything about the troops. I didn't hear a word because I went searching. Because that's how I am. I want to see if it's just us that you fighting against, or is it all-inclusive bias? But it's just us. Because I didn't hear you. I hear back the blue, but I did not hear Blue Lives Matter on January 6th. It was mum's the word. And it's getting upsetting. It's getting to the point where we cannot normalize you killing us blatantly on film. We can't normalize this, and then you have this week, and I'm gonna be very quick. I just want to show a whole hypocrisy and inherent hypocrisy. So this week in Hutchinson, Minnesota, a 61-year-old white man, his name is Luke Alvin, Alvine. had an altercation at a lumber yard. He hit someone with lumber. The police caught up with him. He left the scene. The police caught up with him. There's a video. That's why I'm saying his name so you can Google it. Luke Alvin. He got to a cul-de-sac. They tracked him in. Police cars, everything. He hit the police officer with a hammer. They got guns drawn. Mm. The closest police officer that was to the driver door, Mr. Alvin backed up, hit a police car, getting ready to run the police that was next to him on the driver's side over. So he had no choice but to save his life and jump on the ledge of the driver door. And Mr. Alvin took off full speed with a police officer hanging on his door. But guess what? 61-year-old Luke Alvin was arrested unscathed. Nothing. Dylan Ruth got Burger King. Kyle Rittenhauser walked with his hands up and a long weapon past the police because he just shot someone, 2 people. They rode right past him. You know why? Because their eye wasn't on him, because he did not fit what the hunt was for that day. He got arrested unscathed and also had a charity website where you can donate to his fund that made over $500,000 or more. And Sergeant William Kelly of Norfolk Police Department donated, along with a couple of other public officials, and wrote a nice note to him and said, "You've done nothing wrong. We will back you." What do you do with that? That's a mindset. No train. You can't train that away.
It's deep.
It's hard. It's disheartening. It's almost, it's to the point where you don't want to give up as Black people because we got to keep keeping on. But it's like, what do we do at this point?
Let me say something, and I see you, Heather. I'm trying to keep my cool, but it's so difficult. You just said something, Elisa. We cannot normalize the killing of Black people. We screaming, stop killing us.
Please. Please.
Go ahead, Heather.
So one of the things I've thought about recently is my mom and I were having a conversation a couple weeks ago. My brother is a professional firefighter in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's his job. And he was going to be sitting for the test to become a captain. And she was just telling me about the process of what that looks like. And you sit for the test as a captain and you do a anonymous written test. And then you do an oral test at some point. Whenever you do this testing, it's always, proctored by an outside entity. So no one knows who you are. So you can't use your relationships or your connections or, I owe you, you owe me kind of thing to get these kinds of promotions in the fire department. You also have to be able to identify very clearly the policies and the procedures that are required for a multitude of different scenarios. So when they're training for, when they're sitting for these promotions, they're asked lots of different questions with specifications of this type of fire, this kind of, going into as a first responder, whatever. And you have to give a very detailed delineation of what you do in each one of those scenarios. And there's a point here. And the issue is this, and I'm going to piggyback off of what Elisa just said. The issue, obviously, that we're dealing with is the racism. I'm not dumb enough to think that there aren't racist firefighters. Of course there are. There's probably lots of them. There's probably lots of good old boy, racist firefighters who know that they are or don't know that they are. in, serving our communities all across the country. However, the training is done so meticulously, and they have specified, policies and procedures, and then outside groups are being used to, help with the investigations and help with their promotions, and they're being monitored by outside groups, not the internal investigations. And then when there's an issue, they're held to account. So what I don't get is, and granted, I know they don't carry guns. Okay, I get it, but you don't see things in the news of firefighters showing up at a, first response to a shooting or to, a car accident, and refusing to help out the people who are in the crime scene or in the accident or at the fire who are Black, and just leaving them there to die. Maybe it happens. If it happens, I'm not seeing it on the news on a regular basis. So somehow that training kicks in and they do what they're supposed to do, whether they have bias or not. Why, if we have the capability to do that with first responders in this one area, are we not allowing it to be done with the other area as well? Like, I don't get it. Like we keep saying over and over and over, has to be something that's outside of the police departments, because you've got this disgusting, ingrown, inbred group of people who are going to keep covering for each other, and it's never going to get fixed. So I'm sorry. That's just one. I want to know, how is it that we can train one whole group of first responders to, despite their bias, still be able to perform their job at a level that we're not hearing about it in the news on a weekly basis, causing harm, direct bodily harm to people who are not white?
Because it's
something I think about.
It's the culture. How many times have you heard retired or former cops say that you guys don't understand? There's a great pressure to behave in a certain way. And when you're the cop that says, hey, man, you may be going too far, you're the one who's ostracized. You're the one who is now unsafe when you go out there because they turned their back on you, and you're the one who gets fired. Look at the Buffalo police officer, the Black woman who got fired in 2008, right? That same guy who she pulled off from choking that man, and that man still says today that she saved his life. That cop is now in prison for, guess what? Excessive force. Now they have made her right. They gave her pension back. It's almost $900,000. But man, we're talking about 2008. That's 13 years ago. Here's where I want to turn the corner. I want to recognize something real quick. Pastor Gary Holland, I see you. We see your comments. I think that you're right. Pastor Holland is sick and tired of being sick and tired of us talking. He said, us talking here sometimes sounds like church folks talking to church folks, right? When do we turn this outside of us and go deal with them? But right after something he said, Pastor Daniel Bowman made a comment. He says, listen, the whole world is watching the Chauvin trial. The whole world saw what happened to Mr. George last year. It's not like we don't know. Now, here's what I want to know from you all. From last year, when we did all the marching and protesting, and then when that subsided, we did go into our halls of justice. Some things did happen. So just a few things I'll name. The death penalty has been abolished in Virginia, right? In the city of Baltimore, they have made it a policy. They are no longer going to pursue minor traffic offenses, and they're saying that since they've been doing that, the crime goes down. And I would imagine one reason is because the people who are normally victims of that type of policing don't feel over-policed anymore. It's a doggone shame that you got to die when you get pulled over for expired tags, and that ends up in death. Something is wrong. Back to my question. I'm sorry I chased that rabbit. In your opinion, has there been any measurable progress in criminal justice reform, or in attitudes, or in exposure to things that we know are not right? Because I think we're at a point now where we don't have to put a spotlight anymore pointing out racism. It is very obvious, and if anybody didn't know it, you saw it on January 6th. You saw it all in the lead up to the election. America has a very bad problem with racism. It is out of control. Do you see a measurable success from last year to this year? And can we take what's happening this year to help it to turn a corner and make even more progress if you do see progress from last year? Open question.
No, I mean, I'm gonna say this flat. I don't see any measurable success. It's just more the same. You know, things happen, and then when we do take a step forward and we do something, they move the goalpost. You know, I mean, you look at Georgia and what they did with the election. You know, we it all ties together. Election, politics, making the right decisions and whatnot. It all ties together. So we figure out the game. We figure out a way to get our voices heard that way, and go out and we do something. They don't like it. They move the goalposts because they have the power. So I personally haven't seen. I can't say that I've seen any measurable change overall because, as you said, the whole world is watching the Derek Chauvin trial. If he gets anything less than the maximum penalty that he deserves, that just it continues to send a message. So you continue to have these people who make excuses for everything that's happening and they put it back on us. And so that just perpetuates everything and it all just starts over again. So personally, no, I haven't seen any measurable change. Yeah, I mean, you hear more people talking, but I mean, this stuff is not news to us. This stuff is news to them. You know, this is what we've been dealing with forever. So no, I mean, the only measurable change that I would be willing to say that I could even acknowledge is if people like Derek Chauvin start to actually get convicted for the crimes that they are committing, because that is the only thing that is going to send a message to other police officers and stuff that you can't just kill Black people and get away with it. They do it because they feel, if you could look at Derek Chauvin, even in the trial, but you could look at him, he knew that he was going to be protected no matter what he did. He knew he was going to be protected by his fellow police officers and the system. So until you start seeing publicly people like him going to jail, not just a one-off, people like him going to jail, being held accountable, you're not going to see no change. Why? Why change a system that's working the way it was intended to work? It was never intended to work for us. It's intended to work for them, and it does. So,
amen to that, brother. Amen. Go ahead. Somebody else?
I think to answer the question, it's not a measurable amount of change, but there has been some change in the right direction. I think, like, I know that New York City has looking at getting rid of qualified immunity in a tangible way. They open up their disciplinary action records so it is public. And I do know that, here in the state that we did legalize marijuana, we're making small strides, and I think it's not measurable because I I believe that it is just so we're so used to crumbs and fighting so hard just to get a little bit, and we're looking for more, and we're still getting just a crumb here and a crumb here. um and I think that that's why people, are just like, it has to be something significant, like something big, because we are losing lives, we're losing souls, we have been losing lives, we have been losing souls way, way, way before George Floyd. We've been voting, we've been mobilizing, we've been marching, we've been doing everything. We're not reinventing the wheel, right? We have been doing all of these things as Black people. We fought for the right to vote, so we are voting. But like he said, when you like what happened in Georgia, they moved the goalposts, they changed the rules. It's like we on a hamster wheel trying to chase this dream, trying to make America live up to its ideals, and we feel like we're on a hamster wheel. So to be positive, there has been some change. Has it been measurable, remarkable? Not really.
I hear you loud and clear. Heather, what you got to add on this one, my friend?
Yeah, I don't know that I see much measurable change. I see more, in the white community, I see more people who maybe became aware. I think George Floyd's murder was a very costly object lesson for a lot of white people, to be honest. Some people have remained, plugged in and recognized that this is not something that was new that happened with him and that it continues to happen. For other people, it was a really, awful news cycle and they've moved on. But I think piggybacking off of what all of you all are saying is that nothing is going to change unless officers are going to be start to be held to account. Because the fact that we have an officer who can, without to be serious, without laughing and with a straight face say, I made a mistake and I fired my handgun, but I really thought I had my taser as a veteran officer. And many people in the public were like, well, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Everybody makes mistakes. Like I buy that. Is just how it's so clear how willing, especially white people, are to grab onto something that makes it not our responsibility, and then to try to turn the story around. Well, he shouldn't have run, and then put the weight on the victim, and it happens every single time. And the excuses as to why people are being murdered are getting more and more ridiculous, and the reasons why people shouldn't die and be killed by police are getting more ridiculous. But what isn't happening is police aren't being held accountable. They aren't. They're still being coddled by the police community as well as by the white community as a whole. And so I think until that changes, I don't see a lot of change that's going to happen. And I really do think it needs to be change that comes from the outside. There's got to be a group that helps police what's going on with the police, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, you muted, Carl.
Thank you. I'm such a professional. Go ahead, bro.
No problem. No, I want to add too. So and people do make mistakes, but when you're in the line of work, when you make a mistake, people die. And so I will say, I watched the video of, I think his name was Adam Toledo, right? The 13-year-old boy that got, we saw the video yesterday or whatever. That happened on March 29th. And I watched the whole video, from when the cops were in the car to when they got the call to all the way up until they ended it. That officer, this is my opinion based on the video, the officer that shot him, I feel like he made a mistake. And I say that because afterwards, he's crying. You can tell if you watch the video and you listen to everything, he's walking away. He's walking by himself, and he's the point where he goes and he sits down, and he is upset. He's crying. That doesn't excuse what he did. But I feel like with him, he made a mistake. He showed remorse. You can hear it. He just still needs to be held accountable. But the culture that allowed him to be there is the problem. They allowed him to make that mistake because he was quick to draw his weapon and shoot this boy. And the thought process that went into that, it was nothing. It didn't matter. You know what I mean? He saw the threat. What he thought was a threat, he shot him. Didn't even think twice about it. That right there is what really needs to be on trial and what's got to stop, because it's that thought process that is getting us killed in combination with the other things that I mentioned today. But when you look at Kim Potter, and her response and everything like that, and the fact that she's a 26-year veteran, you didn't make a mistake. You know what I mean? That wasn't a mistake. So mistakes do happen, but unfortunately for them, that's the line of work you're in. You cannot afford to make those kinds of mistakes, and you cannot be offered grace when you do make those types of mistakes. Her yelling out taser, for me, when I watched that, her yelling out taser was 26 years of experience of knowing what needed to be said, knowing that you were recording, and knowing that what you needed to say to cover your behind when this hit. You knew you weren't grabbing your taser. So that's my opinion on that. But it's the mindset that's got to change. And how do you do that?
So I want to entertain one of the themes that's going on here. Two of them, Gary and Regina, and I agree. And once again, this is an open question. So where do we go from here? How do we take the passion that all of us have and look at our audience? Our audience is passionate. How do we take this and take it to policymakers, lawmakers, and say, listen, something has to be done. This is no longer acceptable. Something must be done. How do we do it? Open question.
First, we have to take a page out of the young people's book. The young people are out here getting the work done. They are out here, we may not agree with their tactics, but like the sergeant in South Carolina, the only reason why this man got arrested is because a young person was videotaping and they know how to go viral because the police came, right? The police came. There was a report, but nothing was done. They told the police the man was assaulted, but nothing was done. But when the video went viral, the police had to do something. And when these young kids found out who the sergeant was, because they know how to do this Generation Z, it would take me, if something is going on, I wouldn't even know if I could unlock my phone quick enough to get good footage, right? So these kids, they find the commanders, they find the job, they're fighting racism one person, one situation at a time. And that is something that we, as people a little older, need to take a page out of their book. We need to be able to formulate for ourselves, not a county, not a state, not in for ourselves in our own neighborhoods. If we have neighbors or someone who is um, being racially profiled, who is being discriminated against, we need to be the ones who come out in force with this, identify it, and take it to the perpetrator immediately, right? We need to do that. We have plenty of opportunities to do that because we know, well, at least I know that it's happening every day where I live. We just have to get a word out to the people that you could come here. We're not going to talk. We're not negotiating. We're not going to sit down and because they want to talk business and quiet us down, right? And say we have to work with these people. We should get along with these people that are powers to be. Absolutely not. If you wrong one of us, you wrong all of us. Not color excluded, because I know Heather a long time and I know plenty of our white allies who will stand in the front line side by side. Don't want to be at no negotiating meetings talking about we can make this happen, and then it doesn't happen, or we get a watered down version. Let's not waste time with all of that. We know where we at. We know what we up against, and it's enough of us that if we all show up and pull up, if something like that is happening, then we should be doing that. We cannot stand by and let hi, Mr. Peters. We can't stand by and let okay, good to see you. We can't stand by and let racism just keep happening until it's a national event. Like we just can't. We have to. I applaud the young people that pulled up on that sergeant in South Carolina. I applaud the young people that are bringing attention to the issues. We have to find some way that we can navigate in this world, but we have to do it together, right? We have to
Amen.
do it together.
Thank you, Elisa. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring it to your attention, and Captain Peters, I certainly appreciate you coming on. We were just talking about, what do we do from here? Captain Peters is a member of the Stafford County Sheriff's Office. He has been very visible in our fight with many of our groups that have done it lawfully. And he's been very fair. And I would imagine, sir, that you got to have a broken heart on one end, but you still support your brothers in blue. But something has to change, and we're talking about that right now. What can we do? We're talking amongst each other, but how do we get our concerns, our passions, our frustrations to the people who can make a difference? And I'll say this, and I'm going to be quiet and give you the microphone. We certainly don't think that the majority of police officers are bad cops. I've never thought that, but I think that you would agree that your bad apples cost people lives, and it just cannot be acceptable for people, especially people of color, to continue to be killed like this. Something has to stop. Sir, we want to hear from you.
So you're right. Um, it's it's an interesting position to be a black man in law enforcement right now, because you we share the same feelings that people not in uniform share, but then you also know that the heart and the drive for the majority of law enforcement is not what you're seeing on the news. So we have this interesting dichotomy we have to get through to figure out how to bring those things to light. Now, in our position, Stafford County, we have a great relationship with our community. So we're watching the rest of the world just like you guys are, and we're watching with the same broken heart and the same broken spirit and the same question of what are y'all doing out there, that the rest of the world is. So one of the big things is focusing our attention on the places that are performing these acts that we are unhappy with. And a lot of times that we see that the general disdain for law enforcement comes to all of us, so we all bear the burden of the bad apples, which in this profession you kind of get to accept, but it's not fair. And I tell some young people, it's almost like, if a person of color commits a crime, and then we associate that crime with every other person of color that we see, we know that's not fair and it's not what we want. It's actually what we're fighting against. But it's what's happening to law enforcement right now. We're all being placed in that box. So what we encourage people to do is, when these frustrations come up, call us. We are a very open department. Our boss, Sheriff Decatur, he loves to talk to people. We like to talk to community, and we like to hear those fears, because we have the same concerns and the same objections that everyone else in the world does. But at a certain point, people think that we are with the other law enforcement officers who are doing these things, and that's just not the case. So opening that dialogue and not being afraid to call and say, hey, look, we would like a law enforcement perspective on this. We know it's not you who did it, but we want to talk about it because we're hurting. And there's a lot of members of the department that watch these videos every day, and we say the exact same thing. But from our position, it's very hard to criticize another law enforcement agency. It's very hard to criticize another law enforcement officer when you don't know the entire story. And that's
Understood.
we try and stay away from, is Monday morning quarterbacking something that we don't know the entire thing. So repairing a relationship, in our eyes, is, we get put in a position where people want us to repair a relationship for something happening 3,000 miles away, and we cannot do it. It's impossible. What we can do is we can reassure our community. We can reassure our community groups and leaders and the folks that are hurt by the things that they see. We can reassure them that, hey, it's not us. And if it is us, then we can atone for it. We can account for it. We can be open about it. We can talk about it, and we can help move the process forward. So it's not a simple answer. It's not but it is a long discussion that needs to start with people contacting our office saying, hey, we just want to talk. We want, we're not blaming anybody, but we want to know, how would you handle a situation, or what do you think, or what do your people feel? Because that goes a long way in helping to fix some of these things that we didn't do, but we want to be a part of the solution.
Got it. And Mickey, I'm gonna come to you in just a moment. Captain Peters, I agree with you. Stafford Sheriff's Department has done a pretty good job of working with the public. Evidently not perfect, but I do respect what you are doing, and we appreciate you personally. for you, without putting yourself out there too far, I'm sure that in all the years you've been a law enforcement officer, and now you're in a position where your decisions affect a lot of officers. How do you approach those, even who may not be a part of Stafford Sheriff's Office, but you know them, and you know that they're doing things that are not good, maybe even not legal? How do you, as a peer, say, bro, sister, this is not right? How do you do that?
It's very simple. I've done it, and I'll give you an example. I remember another jurisdiction came into Stafford pursuing a vehicle, and one of the law enforcement officers was hot. I mean, he was fit to be tied. And one of the things that you learn very early on is you got to be a good partner. And being a good partner sometimes means tapping out the person there and saying, "Hey, look, that's enough. We'll take over. You go cool off," and things of that nature. So I ended up calling, their supervisor, saying, "Hey, look, that's went a little far, and you need to look at it." So it's not as hard as you think.
Okay.
One of the things about being a professional law enforcement officer is you don't want bad cops any more than anybody else does. And some people think that there's this, secret thin blue line, and there's all this, that, and other. When that day and age is gone, we know the climate of America. We know that, it's not something we want to associate with, and it's just plain wrong. So it's not as hard as you may think. Now, I will tell you, one of our advantages is we work for an elected official. So if the people aren't happy, we're unemployed. It's very simple. And a lot of states that you see with unions and things like that, they have a much harder time, but we don't have that in Virginia. So, we work for the people, and we have to ensure that there's a certain level of satisfaction, or I don't have a job and my boss doesn't have one either next 4 years. So it's not as hard as you think. And there are a lot of officers who step out there and say, this went too far, or I didn't like what happened, or we need to talk about it, or that person needs to go. And it happens more often than you think. Now, this is what I tell a lot of people. Personnel issues, and that's what that is, they're not something that are broadcast. So the bad apples that get pushed out of law enforcement, you never know about it, because it's just like you at your job. If you do something to get fired or reprimanded, you don't want them putting in a company newsletter saying, "Hey, we took care of this person and they were really messing up. This is what we did to them." There's a certain level of privacy that goes on to any employment, even in a very public mess up that we may do as law enforcement. So we have to have a level of trust, and we have to have, that understanding that personnel issues, as public as the act was, the personnel issue is very private.
Amen. Thank you. Mickey, did you have a question?
I wanted to comment real quick. And Captain Peters, thank you for getting on and having a discussion. Like one of the things you said, you guys don't, you guys are being blamed for things that, that you didn't do. And it's making people fearful and angry at all police officers when it's not everyone. And I definitely understand what you're saying about that. I would say, though, the issue that people have, and the reason that it's like that, is because of accountability, or lack of accountability. And so we as a whole, as the country, as Black people, or anybody's watching, our anger and frustration, as I'm sure is the lack of accountability. Like you said, it's a job like anything else. So, you're not going to see the HR issues and stuff like that. But when you have something so public as these killings that are happening, and then people not being convicted, and other police officers, and now I will say, in these last few ones, there have been other police officers and other law enforcement who have spoke out publicly and condemned the actions. But that doesn't happen often. And I know you got to have the whole story, but that culmination of everything is what people are upset about. It's the lack of accountability, and then the lack of people being willing to explain the process. So, what we see is somebody getting shot. We see somebody being allowed to resign so that they're not fired. They don't lose their pension. So to us, they're being rewarded and given the opportunity to still save their career, their money, and all of that stuff before any type of investigation even happens. That's what frustrates everybody. And that is what unfortunately makes a lot of us fearful and be ready to blame all of the police officers when we know, most of us understand and know, and it's not everybody. But I don't know which one is not. So when I get pulled over or when I see lights behind me, I have to assume that the person that's getting out this car to come up to my window is like Derek Chauvin and is like all of those other people, and that the system is going to back them the same way. It is very much us against them. And it is because overall, these people are not held accountable. And if they are, we don't see it.
And that's fair, but one of the things that we have to do is look at perspective. And I say this before I say this comment all the time. Any life that's lost, no matter whether it's justified from law enforcement or not, there's a couple of victims in that. The family of the person who's lost will never accept anything from law enforcement as to why their loved one is gone, ever. And we don't expect them to. The officer who was involved in that's life has changed forever because they've taken a life. So we have to start with that. And then we go on to a lot of the things that we see in law enforcement and that you see in the community, and when somebody loses their life at the hands of law enforcement, and I've said this before, a lot of it is because the way the laws are written right now in case laws and the way that law enforcement management gives law enforcement the ability to do what they did. So not saying it's right, wrong, or indifferent, or there's not a different way it could have been handled, but I think sometimes we mix up the words vengeance and justice and we get them very confused. So there's a fine line where we have to understand that sometimes it is justified. And I've seen us put a lot of these incidents with law enforcement across the nation in the same basket and treat them the same way and say, well, that officer took that person's life, so they should be fired, they should be charged. When under the law and under the Constitution and case law and all the things that are the standard for law enforcement in America says that was okay to do, or it was justified in nature. Now, we go back to, we don't expect any family to understand that or to accept it. And I would never ask them to. But we as people in the community have to know which one of these, are justified, which aren't justified, what should have been done, what didn't happen, what did happen, before we jump on that train and start persecuting the officer when they weren't wrong. See what I'm saying?
Captain, I'm so glad you're here. I will tell you, some of these comments I'm not posting because you got some people that are really want to hold you accountable, and I want to be fair to you because you came in right in the middle. I would love to get with you and schedule some time to come back because I really do want our audience to be able to ask you some of these questions, but I want to be fair to you also because I really am grateful that you came on in the middle of whatever you're doing. Chief Nate Thompson is here. It looks like he's having some connectivity problems. He's from Aquia Harbor. And so we're going to let Chief Nate, hopefully you can hear us, Chief Nate. It looks like you're having some connectivity issues, but as soon as he's available, we want to bring him in. And we do thank you to officers who are executives in your departments. We thank you for coming on. And I don't want my audience to think I'm being soft on the cops, but it has to be a level of professionalism here too, because they popped in impromptu. We don't want to just jump on them. We want to give them a chance. One thing I've always said, and all that get an understanding. You may disagree, but it's good to hear their perspective because what we're trying to do is get to a point where we can have dialogue. Chief Nate, can you hear us? Can you hear us, Chief Nate Thompson? Yeah, he's having connectivity issues.
Cole, I would like to ask a question of Captain Peters. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just want to go back to what you said about the personnel issue. How does that work? If you have an officer who has 18 disciplinary or command disciplinary actions against him, and it is founded, these are founded, when they are let go because of I don't know, whatever the complaints are or however the hierarchy goes, all the way up to and including use of excessive force and or termination, when they can go to another county and commit the same egregious acts. So it has to be a level of accountability, at least in that aspect, where we don't have a cop that is, just having a bad career and a known, you know, a repeat offender, for lack of better words, that a repeat offender that has all of these command disciplines and has all of these disciplinary things. And what do we do in that aspect? I heard you speak on the personnel issue and people's personal things, but I feel like those type of things should be public.
Well, that's the ever-ending question right there. And so I know in Stafford, when we hire, we don't lower our standards. And there are a lot of agencies whose hiring standards aren't up to what we would say is very, professional or are, up to that standard. So every law enforcement agency in Virginia is is governed by its own manager or sheriff. So how they choose to hire is how they choose to hire. So I tell people all the time, you know, contact that agency. If you have an issue with a deputy, if you have an issue with an officer, then it's our responsibility as people in that community to contact that agency and say, hey, look, this is what the problem we have with this person is. So I can't speak for other agencies. I can only speak for Stafford County Sheriff's Office. And if somebody comes to us in the hiring process, and I've seen it many, many times where we think they're a good candidate, we want to hire them, they've got this good record, and we go to the background check and we see IA after IA after IA, they're not getting hired here. But we can't say that about every jurisdiction in Virginia or every jurisdiction in the United States, because there are some that will hire and give these folks a second chance. And we can't control that. It's up to their community to control that and go to those chiefs and sheriffs and executives and say, hey, look, what are we doing? You know, we know what this guy's doing. We know that he's got problems. He or she's got problems. You know, we see the trend. What are you doing? And that type of pressure goes quite some ways in certain jurisdictions.
And the second half of that is, how in Stafford County do you guys handle complaints from the community? If there is a complaint against a police officer, is it a situation where it goes up the chain, or how does that work if you have a complaint against someone?
It depends on the severity of the complaint. There are a lot of complaints that are handled at supervisor level. There are some that go straight to our IA. Some of us as commanders get involved depending on what it is. If it's use of force, if it's excessive force, if anything like that, it automatically goes to our IA department and they look into it because they're the professionals. But every complaint that comes in the Stafford Sheriff's Office, we investigate at some sort of level and we try and resolve it. And then we contact whoever made the complaint and give them, you know, we can't give them all the details because, again, it's personnel records, but we can tell them either they're right, wrong, or indifferent, but we're doing it to try and fix the issue. So everything is looked into at this department.
And how long have you been on the force? Because I remember you from a long time ago.
I've been here for 17 years, about 17 and a half.
Yeah. You know my nephew, Saeed Riddick.
Ah, my man. Yes.
Yes, your man.
All right, Heather has a question for you, Captain.
Hold on just a second.
That audio was terrible.
It's him.
Yeah, we muted him for a minute. He's got a call. Go ahead. All right.
Thank you. So one of the questions that I always think about when things like this happen, even if it doesn't end in death, but in bodily harm or things like that, is there a policy that states with police officers that once you've initiated this type of stop, like you're going to have to see it through to the end, or what's the deal here? Because I feel like so many times, if somebody is running or if they're not cooperating but it's not at a violent level, especially for these minor infractions or even, warrants that are out for minor infractions, it feels like things are getting escalated to the degree that has cost people their lives that really doesn't matter. I mean, I know point of a police officer is supposed to be to protect and serve, and they're supposed to be protecting and serving our communities. But these people that keep getting caught in the crossfire don't pose a threat to the rest of us. And so allowing them to run, you've got their information, you might know where they live, you've got their driver's license. Like, why are these things never de-escalated and restarted at another time? It seems like once it started, the police officers are like, well, that's it. We're taking it to the end. And I guess for a civilian like myself, I wonder sometimes why you don't just, let them go, and go after them in time.
Well, that's a great question, and it's very broad. And I'm going to tell you, there are times where we disengage, and pursuits, certain things where we do disengage, and especially if we know who it is. And it all depends on what we always call the valid court transaction. What initiated this, and what is the danger to the community by letting them go or by continuing to engage? So it's not as simple as the word "we never do that," because it's a decision we make on the road, every time we're on a call. And there are certain things in the law that when we put our hands on somebody, we have seized them. And the Fourth Amendment is very clear on seizures and what has to happen if we do that. So we're also bound by law, and it's not one of those things where we can just grab people and then be like, all right, well, I'm out. We're not doing this today. We're going to do something else. So there's a lot of it that there's more to the story than anybody actually knows, or anybody reads, or the entire story is never put in the news because it's not glamorous and it doesn't fit what the media wants to say. But there are many times, especially in my agency, where we do disengage and we do walk away, and we know who they are or whatever's going on. But we have to look at a lot of things. Now, a lot of things don't make the news is, what's the history of the person? What are we there for? What's the entire story? And I notice in the news, everybody wants to know everything about the police officer, but when you start to talk about the suspect, then all of a sudden becomes very taboo. And they don't want the whole story in that person. So the totality of the circumstances when we're there involves everybody involved in the entire story from the minute that we meet until the minute that we go away. So we do disengage. We do try and de-escalate. We do. But what you see in the media are all the times that police officers go bad.
Captain Peters, we have a question. How can our law enforcement leadership be leaders to help us raise our voices so statewide change is made or at least discussed?
Well, first, we want to know what the change is. And I'm going to tell you, over the last year, there have been a lot of changes into what law enforcement can and can't do. If you guys are familiar with the law and some of the things that the legislature have done to make it, I don't want to say harder for law enforcement, but to make it more difficult for us to interact with people. So I always like the full story. What are we trying to accomplish? What is our goal? And when we know what the goal is, we can sit and talk about that goal and how we can pull in our law enforcement leaderships, our legislators, and our community, and we can go after those changes that make sense for everybody. But what we're doing right now is we're losing a lot of public safety because we're in a position where it seems that we've gone so far in the other direction that public safety is actually going out the window. So it starts with conversations like these. It starts with, us reaching out, you all reaching out and saying, hey, this is what we don't like, and we want to discuss it. So let's get the whole story first. I want law enforcement's perspective, and we want the civilians' perspective on why these need to change. And then we have a discussion, and then we take it to our legislators. We take it to our congressmen, our senators, and all those folks and our delegates, and we say, this is what we want to fight for. And then we fight as a team. But right now, everybody seems to be fighting against each other, and we're fighting on different planes for different reasons.
I would agree. Go ahead, Vicky. Did you have a question?
Well, I had a more of a comment that I was going to send to you, but if I can just say it to Captain Peters right now, I would say, and I know you're not representing for all, police officers out there, but one of the things, like you said, you talked about the media and how they control the story and how, that whole thing goes and it gets people upset. One of the things that I feel like, you're on this panel right now and you are giving us information, whether people want to hear it or whether they agree with what you have to say. that is what it is. But at least you're here giving us this information. It would be nice, I think, that if law enforcement in other areas would utilize the technology that is available and speak, you know, inform people of what's going on. We don't know the process, like you said. We just know what we see. So if there is a process that is hindering certain information being out or anything like that, not saying like the bad mouth the process, but use the technology that we have available to share your story, to give your side of the not your side of the shooting, but this is what police have to deal with. This is what we have to do. This is why you're not seeing XYZ because it's a personnel record. Because a lot of people lose sight of the fact that it is a job just like all of our jobs. You know, take the story as the way many of us people have done, take it out of the media's hands and utilize it. Because I guarantee you, people will listen. You're gonna have people that's gonna not agree, you know. But I know I appreciate you being on here, at least giving some of the details, as to what goes on behind the scenes. All of that over time will go into helping people. I'm not gonna say be less frustrated, but will add to more people understanding what's going on. And again, I know you're not representing for all of the police all over the country. I understand it, but I'm saying that as in general, if law enforcement would just say, you know what, I'm gonna get on. I'm gonna have a Zoom today, Facebook Live today, and we're gonna talk about some of the processes that law enforcement have to go through in order to do X, Y, Z. I think it would go a long way to help people better understand you all and what you all have to deal with. Because all we get to see is what the media shows us. So
Right.
I and I do want to piggyback off of what Mickey is saying. I understand that now because the media is we have cameras, but I'm a little older, so I've been around way before cameras, and I've been here in this area for 22 years, so I know the what you're saying about the media. However, it's just being caught on camera. The practices, to me, in my personal opinion, are still the same. So what's being caught on camera, and no, we may not know the whole story, but I feel like when we hear things like that, it's like we are intelligent enough to some of us to form a educated opinion. So if we see that a man is sitting on someone's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, even though it's caught on camera, I've seen this before, right? So we know that, okay, whatever he did, he didn't mean to die. He didn't need to die. And what we saying as a community is that why does the end result, and not you personally, but why does the end result always result in death of unarmed men? And listen, if you are in the middle, I know that you guys are not Batman. Y'all don't and fly out the sky to save the day. Most police officers come after things are happening or has happened, or you're in the middle of something going on. And if that is the case, and there's something violent going on, or someone has the firearm, or they're shooting and stuff like that, we can have an educated medium on that. But when it's unarmed black men, it's just so heavy. And some of us who are older, who were here before the cameras and from different areas, I'm an import, I'm not born and raised in Virginia, but we've seen this before in marginalized areas.
So I would never argue with you, and I agree that a lot of what's happening has been happening, and with the invention of these cameras and phones, everybody is part of the news now, and it is bringing a lot of bad behavior to the forefront. We can all agree on that. Things have been happening, between law enforcement communities for years, and if we know our history as Black people, we know that there was a time when police were used as a tool against Black people. We know that, and that is something that the country is still reeling from and still trying to fix. So that distrust is always going to be there because our history as minorities in this country we haven't always had the best relationship with folks, right? Let's just be honest. but you're right. With the media, it's showing some of the behavior that has been going on and on and on, and now it's coming to the forefront, and people are acting surprised. It's not a surprise, but let's put it in perspective though. How many law enforcement officers around the country are there, and how many interactions per day are there between the police and the communities they serve? There are millions of them every day, and what we see is a snapshot of bad behavior and people dying. And then we got to go back to this. What is unarmed? you know when we're trained, unarmed is a very fluid thing, because you know I remember the Michael Brown situation. I remember some other similar situations where an officer was getting punched in the head by a much stronger and bigger person. How many of those are you expected to take before you take action and before that becomes deadly force? So until you understand what deadly force is and what unarmed really means in the eyes of the law and the Constitution, we're fighting a battle that you'll never win, because we don't understand the rules to this fight. So I can tell you, if someone hits me in the face 3 or 4 times, it's a deadly force situation, because I'm going to get knocked out. And that's what the law says. So then we go back to, if something happens, we have deadly force, somebody lose their life, then suddenly you killed an unarmed man. No, I didn't. I killed somebody who was trying to kill me. So we have to be realistic in what we're seeing and what our expectations are. Just like with you all, I walk up to people all the time. We have this discussion. How many times can I punch you in the face before you want to kill me? They're like, once. Okay. But for me, because I wear this uniform, I should have to take a beating and almost get killed before I can defend myself or somebody else. And that's what people are saying to us right now. It's almost to the point now even with people with guns, we have to get shot, hurt, or killed before we can be justified in shooting back. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. It's not that way for you all, so it can't be that way for us. So we've got to have that discussion, and we've got to be honest about what unarmed is, and what deadly force is, what assault is, and how much a person is supposed to take, regardless of what they're wearing, before they can defend themselves.
Thank you for saying that, Captain Peters. And much of what you're saying, it brings out some good and some bad. And I'll give you an example of what I'm saying. 2 major things that the people are asking. Number one, what's the status of the body cams with Stafford County? Because we understand that there's been some funding made available very recently. And one person just asked, we understand your analogy. You've made a stop. That person has punched you 3 times in the face. It could be a life or death situation for you if you're knocked out. So you may choose to use deadly force. And I don't mean you personally, but police officers. But one of the questions from the audience is, me as a civilian, if I'm in that same situation, I've been hit in the face 3 times. I pull my weapon and I shoot center mass just like the police are. Will you and I have a similar outcome?
The way the law is designed in Virginia, yes. Self-defense is self-defense. You have to be, and this is the thing, you have to be able to articulate why you did what you did to a reasonable standard. So if it's you, Mr. Armstrong, and the 3 other people on the panel say that what they did because of the entire scope of what was happening to him was reasonable, and we would have acted the same way, that's the way that the incident is judged. And that's the way it should be judged, is what would a reasonable person in a similar situation do? And that's the standard for us, and it's the standard for civilians as well. So it doesn't really change. The only big difference is every situation we go into, there's at least one gun, and we have to worry about that and what's going to happen to it.
Got it. Do you know the status on the body cams for Stafford County Sheriff's Office?
So I just left the Administrative Services Division, and I was actually running the pilots on that and doing that system. We had tested 2 different body camera systems, and we have to test a 3rd. So when I left that position, which was a month ago, we were working towards getting body cameras for the Stafford Sheriff's Office. And there was some debate going back and forth between us and the board about funding and where the $1.8 million was going to come from. But one of the sheriff's top priorities this year was getting body cameras. So we're working towards it. Now, I don't know since I left that position where we are exactly, but when I left it last month, that's where we were.
Thank you. Heather, I believe you had a question. And after Heather's question, we're going to start to wrap up because we don't want to take too much of your time. We certainly appreciate you coming on, Captain Peters.
Oh, no problem. Anytime. I was excited to come and talk to you all.
So my question was just, I know you're getting jumped on here, but this is, it brings up a lot for all of us. But when you were saying with the deadly force and things like that, we have rules of engagement, with our military, and it seems, from our perspective, because I feel like the impetus should be on, law enforcement to prove us otherwise. If the media is giving us a skewed version, and I think the impetus is on the law enforcement to tell us otherwise, kind of like what Mickey was saying. But with our military, we have rules of engagement, and that includes that you don't fire unless you're fired upon. And I know that was one of the statements you made, but that's not something that, I've seen as a civilian, that, people who have been killed have been people who have fired weapons initially. So if our military is held to that standard, and if they don't abide by that standard, there are big consequences, including possibly being kicked out of the military. Why is our law enforcement not held to the same standard?
He got cut off, but can you, Captain Peters? You on mute. You did, sir.
I'm back. I got kicked out for some reason.
Yeah, I saw you pop off. I was like, oh man, maybe I thought you had an emergency. Heather was basically asking, military has to use certain rules of engagement, and I served, we have something called the Geneva Convention. If you ever served, you know about that too. Do officers have something similar? Was that your question, Heather? Okay.
Yeah, because I know he was saying if there's someone firing at you, obviously, you may be wanting to fire back. But myself, for the people that we've seen in the media, at least, we've not seen that be the case, that civilians are being fired upon without having been the ones to initiate violent force.
So there are, and a lot of law enforcement was training with the theory of force plus one, and what that means is we would meet your level of force and go one step above. Our rules of engagement are we're trained to try and de-escalate everything at a certain level. Now, we haven't seen very good examples of that on the news. We watched the Army lieutenant down south there, where I'll say it, those officers did everything they could to bring that situation to a head and just do it wrong. But we do have rules of engagement. We have a use of force continuum. We have a policy, and you have a ingrained culture in your agency on how your agency does things. So we train a lot on de-escalation. We train a lot on trying to not use our weapons. But what you don't want to do is train so much de-escalation that in moments where you have to escalate, officers don't know how to do it or won't do it. Because there was an example of that after Ferguson. There was a young officer who was so scared in Ohio. He was so scared to engage a person with a knife coming towards him because he did not want to be the next officer on the news losing his job and being persecuted for killing somebody, that he backed up almost a quarter mile, fell on his back, and almost got stabbed to death because he did not want to engage that guy with his gun when he should have. I'll tell you, he should have, because that guy had a butcher knife and he was going to kill him. So there's a balance in our rules to engagement. We should always walk into situations going, how can I resolve this with the least force necessary? And then we kind of go off, what is the suspect doing? Because in good police work, the suspect should drive your force. If they de-escalate, so should you. If they escalate, you should escalate with them until they de-escalate. And then when force stops and resistance stops, so does force. So that's how you should be doing business. We go into it with, hey, look, we don't want bad things to happen. We don't want people getting killed. We don't want to be responsible for, somebody losing their life. I don't want an officer to have to think for the rest of his life or her life, what could I have done differently to not take that life? Because people forget that part too. These officers are human, and they have to live with every decision they make, whether they take a life or save a life. And it never goes away. It's just like the military, that builds up. So the force continuum is very fluid, but it's about the culture of the agency and how they respond to calls, which will show you a lot about how the calls get resolved.
Thank you. We're going to start to wrap up here. You did. Captain Peters, I want to tell you first and foremost, thank you so much for coming on in an impromptu situation. You did answer a lot of things. I will tell you, the comments that I'm seeing, we definitely have to set something up. I'm hoping I'm going to get with Pastor Gary Holland. I know he has your information because I would love to talk to you and Chief Nate. And I would like to get some officers from some of the other agencies also, maybe Spotsylvania County, City of Fredericksburg, maybe Prince William, because I do think that to kind of shunt some of the frustration that we're having, I think that the people need to be heard. I'm so serious about that. And I also think that law enforcement officers need to be heard. I know what I'm about to say is going to be unpopular, but I'm going to say it because I love the truth. We ought to hold police officers accountable when they're wrong. But you know what? People breaking the law got to be held accountable too. Okay? And you just can't get out here and act any kind of fool and think that the police officers can't deal with you. Because when I call the police, I want the police to be the police. So, let's be right. Let's be fair. We will hold them accountable, but we got to hold people accountable too when they're not doing right. So the police need to be heard and the citizens need to be heard. And Captain Peters, I really do hope that you are able and willing to sit on a panel that I want to put together so that the people can be heard and so that the officers can be heard. And what I really want to happen is what the scripture says, and all that I get an understanding. And when we get an understanding, sometimes you don't agree. But I can deal with not having an agreement if I can have an understanding. And we need to hear the truth from both sides. So to you, Captain Peters, God bless you, sir. Thank you for coming on. To my panel, Mickey Leon, Elisa Middleton, Heather Hutchison, I want to thank you. What I am going to do before we leave, this was such a hot button issue. I do want to give each of the panelists just a few moments to give closing comments. And I'm going to start with you, Captain Peters, because if you get an emergency, you got the road. So I'm going to give you the microphone first for closing comments.
I'm just here watching the kids at Cavalier Skating Rink trying to keep the peace. So I appreciate it, though. One of the things as a law enforcement officer, I just want everybody to know is, we're not all what bad you see on TV, and we want to work with our community. And there are a lot of us who are hurting alongside everyone else. It's just our position kind of takes us out of being able to show that emotion all the time. But we want you all to know that our doors are always open. Our ears are open. Our hearts are open. We want you all to tell us what you're feeling, because even though, as we're seeing, a lot of these things are not happening in this county, and it's not the Stafford Sheriff's Office. We do bear the weight of some of those law enforcement decisions on our shoulders, and we want to make sure that the people in Stafford County can walk around and say, you know what, that may be happening there, but we know and we trust our law enforcement agency to do the right thing. We know, and we know as law enforcement that mistakes will be made. Hopefully those mistakes don't cost people lives. I mean, that's the last thing we want to do. But if we are wrong, we want you all to tell us. We want you all to tell us, your opinions, your thoughts. We want to have a dialogue. We want to fix it, and we want to move on. We want that relationship. So keep talking to us. Keep reaching out. You know where the building is. Stop in and see us. Talk to us, because we don't succeed without our community. And there's a lot of us that live in our community. So there is no benefit to us having a mistrust or distrust or a bad relationship with the people that we're neighbors with. So come and see us. Thank you all very much for allowing me in here. I truly enjoy these conversations, as tough as they are. And, I know people have raw feelings, and I don't feel beat up on, because it's part of the job, and it's part of what I like to do in this role is communicate. So thank you all very much, and I hope you have a great night.
Thank you, sir. Heather.
Yeah, I don't have any beautiful, let's wrap it up words tonight. It's just, it's heavy, and it's an ongoing conversation. And I think kind of like what Elisa said, I feel the same way, is that the part that's tiring is feeling like, we're having the same conversations, and then the change just feels so slow, to have the conversation, and then it has to go to a committee, and then it has to go to the, this person, and it has to be voted by, on by these people, and then take it to legislation. And I think that's the part that is challenging sometimes. But we can't get tired. We have to keep working. And so I'm grateful for conversations like this. And I am glad that Captain Peters came on, and that you allowed me to come on. Carl, I always enjoy talking with you. I learn things. It's a little bit of therapy for me. It helps me process a little bit through my own emotions and thoughts. And we're just getting started, which is not a fun thing to say when we just met a year ago and we're having a similar conversation. But we're here, and we're motivated, and we're determined, and we're committed, and I'm a part of that group. So, you can always call on me, and I will be here. Thank you.
I got a feeling, Heather, over the next few weeks, I'm going to be calling on you quite often, as well as the other panelists. Elisa.
I just want to say thank you, Carl, as usual, for having me on. I want to thank the panelists and Captain Peters for joining and giving that insight, because it's important. I think that it's important for our community to know the police. I know when I was growing up, I knew my neighborhood cops. We don't walk beats anymore. Everyone's in a car, but we should know the children. We should know the community. We should know the parents. So I'm just hopeful that we would reimagine policing and get the culture of the police department throughout the United States, because even though we like to think we tucked away in our small little world, who knows where life will take us and where we would move. So we want to feel safe anywhere in the United States of America, in the skin that we're in. So I'm here, Carl. If you need me, I'm here. I'm always going to come when you call, brother.
And that's what I love about you. Thank you, sister. Mickey.
I just want to say, first of all, Carl, thank you, cousin, for having this platform as usual. It's always good to be on here. Captain Peters, thank you for coming on. I know it's not an easy position to be in, but at least you showed up, and try to provide some insight. Everybody doesn't agree with everything, which is to be expected, but I appreciate you for showing up and, being willing to have the discussion, the beginning of the discussion. I just want to say, like, Heather, I know you had made a comment, earlier, you felt like you were powerless or whatever, but, you're not powerless. You're a white woman that's here on this platform. So you can continue to talk to your other white friends, white associates, white family members and whatnot, and push them to further understand the conversation that we're having and to participate in these conversations. Don't just have these conversations at home. You know what I mean? Like, be out and encourage people to, like, people who look like you, to have empathy for people who do not look like you. That would go a long way. So you're not powerless. You are actually probably one of the most powerful people up here, just because of what you look like. So, don't feel that way. So I appreciate all of you. Elisa, it's been good to have you on here and listen to you and whatnot. So thank y'all. I learned a lot too. And I want to say, like, we heard like the comments, and I want to acknowledge Regina. Like, I hear you, I feel you, like your pain and everything. We all feel you, but I feel you, sister. You know what I mean? So we all out here trying to get this fight going and whatnot. And that's all I got to say. But Carl, I'm here. Whatever you do, especially this kind of conversation, let me know. I'm here. I'll get my audience. I got an audience. I got a following, and this is on my side of things. This is one of the issues that we've been talking about, especially as Black men and Black people. So I got a bunch of people. I got law enforcement family and friends that I know would be able to jump on too. So,
well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to plan on doing something Sunday night. So go ahead and count. I'm going to start putting it together tonight, because we got to come back and talk about this. I'm going to try to get one or two elected officials on. Y'all don't be surprised. Stand by your phones, because I may be calling you again. We have to talk about this. I'm so glad that Captain Peters came on. And Regina, I heard you. Some of your comments I didn't put up. You know why? Because I didn't want to run them off. Like I said, I wanted to give Captain Peters credit because it was impromptu, and there'll be a time and a place for you to vent directly to him and other law enforcement officers like you want to. So I don't want you to think that I chumped up on you, but I have to maintain the integrity of the show. And these are some of my decisions I know everybody may not agree on, but my name is on it. So, you know, it is what it is. And all of you know something about that. All of you are business owners. You know how that is. When your name is out there, you gotta do what you think is right. I do want to say, listen, for all of you, please go and share this video on your platforms. These are important things that we talked about tonight, and we don't want to keep it to just us, right? See, Elisa's probably smiling because her and my wife going back and forth. I know that's probably what it is. But I want you guys, if you don't mind, go and share this video onto your platform. Let's bring some other people into this conversation, because we're only going to get to where we're going if we have collaboration. I think Pastor Gary Holland put it up there. Regina, I see your phone number. Thank you. I will be in contacting you. That's correct. That is absolutely correct. We got to collaborate. So some of this is going to be painful, because some of this, we're going to have to hear things that we don't want to hear. The cops are going to hear stuff they don't want to hear, and we're going to want to hear things we don't want to hear, because you know what? That's what the truth does to us. So let's do that. I really do appreciate the audience. You guys are awesome. I appreciate my panel. I mean, we're going on an hour and 45 minutes now. I appreciate you. I do want to give a couple of shout outs. First one to this young lady right here, Miss Pam Peters. I worked with her. She has been really a loyal follower of mine. No matter where I pop up, I see Pam, and I appreciate her. I want to shout out my Uncle Buster back in Norfolk and Berkeley. They call him Big, but I ain't gonna tell y'all why. He watches, and if you're watching, just want to let you know I'm thinking about you, and I appreciate you. Aunt Teresa, she was married to my Uncle Tony, who passed away last year. I've seen the things that you posted. I appreciate you. Tisha and I are praying with you. No one can really understand what you're going through, but please know that we're with you in prayer, and we're thinking about you. And thank you for being such a great wife to my Uncle Tony while he was here. We really do appreciate you. And to my former brother-in-law, Ernest Thompson, they call him E in the Bronx and the Boogie Down. And certain parts he's famous, and the other parts he is infamous. But him and I had a chance to chat a little earlier today. We haven't chatted in a few years, and I just wanted to shout him out, say, bro, appreciate your kind words. Panel, thank you. Heather, I feel like I almost did you a little injustice. I feel like you had so much you wanted to say, and I know that's probably true for all of you. So I'm not only going to do it Sunday night, but I'm going to go ahead and put some shows together for the next 2 weeks. We're going to make some progress. Pastor Gary, thank you for your challenge. We're going to get this in front of people who need to hear it, and we're going to do something. Amen? All right. Until next time, may God bless you. May heaven smile upon you. Good night.